This stop is Madison Avenue and East 32nd Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 34th Street. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 34th Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 42nd Street. Transfers available to the 7 and S trains, Long Island Railroad, Metro North and M42. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 42nd Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 52nd Street. Transfers available to the E&M trains and M50. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 52nd Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 57th Street. Transfers available to M57 and M31. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 57th Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 67th Street. Transfer available to M66. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 67th Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 72nd Street. Transfer available to M72. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 72nd Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 79th Street. Transfer available to M79 SBS. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 79th Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 86th Street. Transfer available to M86 SBS. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 86th Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 95th Street. Transfer available to M96. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 95th Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 101st Street. Transfer available to M106. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 101st Street. Next stop, Madison Avenue and East 106th Street. Transfer available to M106. This stop is Madison Avenue and East 106th Street. Next stop, East 110th Street and Madison Avenue. This stop is East 110th Street and Madison Avenue. Next stop, Central Park North and 5th Avenue. This stop is Central Park North and 5th Avenue. Next stop, Central Park North and Malcolm X Boulevard. Transfers available to the 2 and 3 trains. This stop is Central Park North and Malcolm X Boulevard. Next stop, Central Park North and Adam C. Powell Boulevard. This stop is Central Park North and Adam C. Powell Boulevard. Next stop, Cathedral Parkway and Frederick Douglass Boulevard. Transfers available to the B and C trains and M10. This stop is Cathedral Parkway and Frederick Douglass Boulevard. Next stop, Cathedral Parkway and Manhattan Avenue. Transfers available to M7 and M116. This stop is Cathedral Parkway and Manhattan Avenue. Next stop, Cathedral Parkway on Morningstar Drive. Transfer available to M11. This stop is Cathedral Parkway on Morningstar Drive. Next stop, Cathedral Parkway and Amsterdam Avenue. Transfer available to M11. This stop is Cathedral Parkway and Amsterdam Avenue. Next stop, Cathedral Parkway on Broadway. Transfers available to the 1 train at M104. This stop is Cathedral Parkway on Broadway. Next stop, Broadway and West 116th Street. Transfer available to M60 SBS. This stop is Broadway and West 116th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 122nd Street. This stop is Broadway and West 122nd Street. Next stop, Broadway and Tiemann Place. Transfer available to M125. This stop is Broadway and Tiemann Place. Next stop, Broadway and West 131st Street. This stop is Broadway and West 131st Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 135th Street. Transfers available to M5 Limited and M11. This stop is Broadway and West 135th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 145th Street. Transfer available to BX19. This stop is Broadway and West 145th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 157th Street. Transfers available to BX6 and BX6 SBS. This stop is Broadway and West 157th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 159th Street. This stop is Broadway and West 159th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 161st Street. This stop is Broadway and West 161st Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 163rd Street. This stop is Broadway and West 163rd Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 165th Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 165th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 168th Street. Transfers available to the A and C trains, M3, BX7 and M100. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 168th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 171st Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 171st Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 173rd Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 173rd Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 175th Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 175th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 177th Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 177th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 179th Street. Transfers available to BX11, BX13, BX36, BX36 Limited, BX3 and BX35. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 179th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 181st Street. Transfer available to M98 Limited. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 181st Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 183rd Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 183rd Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 185th Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 185th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 187th Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 187th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and West 190th Street. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and West 190th Street. Next stop, Fort Washington Avenue and Cabrini Boulevard. This is the last stop. This stop is Fort Washington Avenue and Cabrini Boulevard. This is M4 limited to Washington Heights Cabrini Boulevard. A fare is required to ride.